What's up, guys? To another episode of Consciously Curious. We have radio DJ Jordan Weiss, aka Dash. You can find him on and hear him on 100.3
Yep.
She. He's got a face for TV and a voice for radio. And we thank him.
It's a
We're
lovely
grateful
comment.
for for his time tonight. He's kind of in between vacations. He just got back from the Grammys and he's about to jet off to the islands for
Tahoe.
Tahoe. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Tahoe for more
Opposite the
vacation
islands, the
time.
mountains.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, welcome. And some of the topics that I want to dive into today kind of resonate with, first of all, like how you got into being a DJ, if that's kind of what you wanted to do kind of for a while now, and if someone were to try to get their foot in the door and try to pursue that route, some advice for those people
yeah,
as well.
absolutely. It's interesting to be asking me because I'm somebody who's just getting into the third largest radio market in the world
Okay.
versus maybe like a morning show host or a Howard Stern who's been there forever, because it is interesting. I ask people the same thing. I work with a lot of different people who've taken so many different career paths, and each one of them gives me a different answer or a different word of advice.
Okay.
And so it's really interesting that, like, even though people all might be successful and kind of in the same place in their profession right now, they've all taken really different paths or have like
So
really
there's
different
there's
words of
no
advice.
traditional path to getting there.
You know, the traditional path is kind of like the Robin Schabotsky How I Met Your Mother like news anchor path, where if you get your start in like a really small market in the middle of nowhere, and then from there you're able to move up to like a somewhat bigger market like Kankakee, Illinois,
Okay.
and then from there, hopefully, if there's an opening, if you have an in, if you can impress somebody, a program director at a big station, you're able to move into the big leagues like a Chicago top 10 radio
Wow.
market station, and you'll start out at nights 6 to midnight or something
Sure,
like that,
sure.
if you're lucky. Or you'll start out part-time and they'll put you on once a week on weekends.
Okay.
I took a completely unorthodox path, which I'm pretty proud of because it still wasn't one found through nepotism. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because you really do need to use your resources and ask the people for favors who you can get favors from.
Sure.
I did radio in college. I absolutely loved it. I'm musically rooted through my mother and that side of the family, but also like my dad kept hard rock on and the radio when driving in the convertible
okay.
growing up. So I just knew it was something I really wanted to be a part of. So in college, there was a radio station in Champaign, University of Illinois,
Okay.
that is a commercial radio station. We played commercials. It's a top 40 indie alternative station. It's actually one of the number one in terms of market share in the country. But it's completely staffed personality side by students. So as a freshman, you try out, you go meet the program
Wow, there's,
director.
there's tryouts.
Yeah, you go and you audition because thousands of this is a 40,000 person undergrad.
Okay.
And like, how many people can you have on air at any given time?
that's right.
So even if only 1,000 people want to be on air personalities, like, still you can only have like 20.
Okay.
So you audition kids and then you put them through training. Most of them are like sophomores, if they're freshmen, if they're lucky. And they first have to go and they shadow these other like maybe juniors or seniors DJs, and you have to watch them for like 3 or 4 days before you can get your shot. And your shot is from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. on a weeknight. And then the program director goes and listens to you and still critiques you, and you're stuck in that like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. slot until you get a midnight to 3 a.m. slot. And then, as your dedication shows, as you get better, you end up with a better slot. So by my junior year, I was hosting like the 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. drive home,
Oh, okay.
which was perfect as like a college student. That's what you
Okay.
want. In most radio markets, the best possible thing is to have the morning show.
Sure,
Like,
sure.
that's the goal in Chicago. But when you're a college student, you don't want to be up before 7 a.m.
Right,
by any
right,
means.
right,
So like
right.
the
So
drive
you
home
had the
slot was
spot.
great. Yeah. And there are tons of highlights there. Like, that was an awesome slot. The year before I got it, the people who had that slot actually got to interview Dave Franco and Christopher Mintz-Platz, who people just know as McLovin.
Sure.
Because they were promoting Neighbors.
They came to U of I?
They came to U of I to promote it because
okay,
U of I is
okay.
such a big Greek population, meaning fraternity, sorority, not Greek, but such a big fraternity, sorority culture at that school that they're like, we need to promote it here because that's what the film's about, is
Wow.
that fraternity and sorority culture. And because of the stature of our station in that area, they came on air and did like a 20-minute interview.
Wow.
So it is interesting that like it was this money-making radio station. There were adults there in sales, but the personalities were all students. So that was, there's so many personalities in Chicago that worked at WPGU. It's kind of crazy.
Oh, okay.
Um, everyone from, actually at 97.1 The Drive, Chicago's classic rock, both the 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. to midnight personality and the midnight to 6 a.m. personalities are both WPGU. U of I
Wow.
alumni. There's a couple at my station. Whip from Eric in the Morning is a WPGU alumni. So Eric in the Morning with Melissa and
Okay.
Whip
Yeah,
is an
yeah.
alumni. Gene Honda, who, if you've ever been to a Blackhawks game, a Chicago Fire game, a U of I football game, he's the announcer.
So that's another kind of potential career option
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways people branch from radio to the entertainment scene in any given way. Chris Hansen, that's his name, right? From the Jams, just another notable guy. Jams is a Chicago morning show.
Oh, okay, okay.
He's one of the bigger reporters on there. He's the backup MC for Gene Honda. Gene Honda's probably like almost 70 now, so everybody wants that job. And it's like the guy before Gene Honda, who was the first ever Chicago Blackhawks radio announcer when they first went and like became a radio broadcasted hockey player or hockey team, was a WPGU U of I alumni.
No
so
way.
it's always held its own as like a staple of Chicago's entertainment scene in the way that it fed talent
Yeah.
into the Chicago market, whether it's TV, radio, or broadcasting, or
Right,
emceeing
right.
events, which is really cool. So I mean, I didn't even know that when I started going there. It just seemed like a really great opportunity, but I slowly
Right.
but surely, as I rose up the ranks, I got to go to these alumni networking things, like realized, wow, WPG really has a lot of
Has
alumni
like
in the city.
scattered,
there.
scattered their alumni.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that being said, like you said, like a lot of people would like kill for that job, like that announcer job, or like any radio DJ job. So once you get it, it's like that's a career, definitely a career path.
Yeah.
And there's not as much turnover. So
No, people don't leave those jobs.
yeah, they don't leave those jobs. So like how'd you get so
Yeah, John
lucky?
Hanson is actually his name too.
John
the
Hanson?
Jams guy, I
Okay,
have
not
to
Chris
remember.
Hansen. I think
Chris Hansen's
Hansen.
like
Yeah,
a
he's the
TV
rapist, or not rapist, the sex offender.
Yeah, something bad. He might be the host of the show.
Yeah,
for this.
he is.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Chris
yeah,
Hansen.
John Hanson, no relation, great guy, is the street reporter for the Jams and the backup MC for
Okay.
Blackhawks, and also a WGN fill-in personality. But yeah, it's a hard job to get. You have to be in the right place at the right time,
Yeah.
but also be qualified.
Yeah.
And I think the same goes for, acting or a lot of other jobs, honestly, in
Right.
the professional world. But in the entertainment world, it definitely seems a little more prevalent,
Mm-hmm.
where something has to have happened for you to get that gig,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And bittersweetly, mine came with my first job out of college. I worked at the world's largest media firm. I had a really great job with really big responsibilities. I was in charge of purchasing the magazine ads for the second biggest global pharmaceutical company, the one that manufactures, your contact solution and
Oh, wow.
your heart failure medicine and psoriasis medicine and arthritis, everything in between. So I was basically deciding where this $100 million ad budget was going, spread out for all their different drugs or brands across different magazines, whether it was AARP or Men's Health or Vogue or Cosmo or GQ.
Okay.
So that was a cool job. I was getting taken out by all these Midwest director of sales for Vogue to the hottest restaurants in Chicago that I would never pay for on my own. But outside of that, it just wasn't quite redeeming enough,
Fulfilling enough.
fulfilling enough.
And how did you gain anything from that in order to set you up for this, or like that was just kind of a side tangent, like
Yeah,
not completely unrelated?
I think you if you're open to it, you can learn wherever you are.
Oh, okay.
And I couldn't quite pinpoint the assets that I picked up at that job at the moment.
Sure.
But I could tell you that I learned a ton.
Yeah.
And if anything, I kept my skills fresh that were that networking, the ability to
Sure,
talk to
you,
these
you
people.
got to realize what were good ads and bad ads and
Right, yeah,
things like
everything
that,
and
yeah.
anything. I still definitely have a foot in the advertising and marketing world.
Right.
Even if it's just in mindset or when people ask me for help.
Right.
I had a friend at one of the biggest hotels in Chicago actually asked me to come get drinks with her on the house so that I could help consult.
Oh, wow.
Because they're having some problems bringing people in.
Yeah.
And that partially comes from I ran a full-service advertising agency in Champaign, also fully staffed by students.
Really?
Who were the top ad firm. They ended up cycling or funneling into the top ad firms
Sure,
in
sure,
Chicago.
sure. Just from the experience.
Most of them, yeah. So you had these kids who had already interned at the top ad firms in the world, making ads for free, pro bono, for some of the local small businesses in Champaign. And I was doing everything from picking up the clients to overseeing every single creative ad, coming up with copy, whatever else.
Was that so? You formed that group, or you just kind of
I
came
ended up taking it over.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's like a
Gotcha.
2,000 person club.
Yeah.
And then this group was like one of the groups that you had to interview to get into within that club.
Sure, sure.
So I was the president of Midnight Oil, which is the advertising group,
Cool.
and they still make really great advertising.
Cool, cool, cool.
So that was cool too. So yeah, that fed me into the media buying position because that was a hard job to get otherwise. But I knew I needed to get back into radio because I was on air for 4 years in
Missing it.
Champaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you doing any voice work in between that time, just to practice, just to keep up with the times? Or?
You know, I would go over to WNUR Evanston, which is Northwestern's radio station, their student station, just to stay fresh. I'd help run the board some days. My mom actually runs a really cool blues show
Oh, okay.
on that station once a week, once every couple
The
of weeks.
Heartland, live at the Heartland, or
Different one. That's WLUW.
Oh.
Also great. That's Loyola's student radio station too. So I've worked that like A&R angle, working on the skills that were like being the roadie growing up. Because I would be the kid with like some blues artist like guitar, like at 12 years old, like in the club till 2 a.m.
that's
just watching
awesome.
over stuff. So definitely like environmentally seasoned for the music and entertainment industry from a young age.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So after like 8 months at back to the career thing, after around 8 months at the media firm, as much as the paycheck was nice and it was a highly appreciated job within the media industry, obviously out of need for fulfillment, I left and started like literally took the mailroom type job for Chicago's biggest classic rock station, which is 97 on the Drive.
Okay.
So yeah, it was funny. I must have applied to them while I was still in college, and the promotions head, who's awesome for 92 on the Drive, like was like, hey, I know it's been a lot of months, but like, are you still interested in like working here? And I was like, absolutely.
For that mailroom.
It was just promotions assistant job.
Oh, okay.
But you know, in the grand scheme of thing, like it was
Essentially.
any way to get into the company.
Right.
Take the mailroom job.
Right.
Because it truly can pay off. So I worked in promotions for 90 on the Drive, and then 101.9 The Mix, our sister station, and The She, which is our other sister station, which I became an on-air personality for about a year. And during that time, I was like knocking on the doors of all the higher ups who were in control of the DJs, the on-air radio personalities in Chicago, just asking them to listen to my tape.
Yeah.
And out of their kindness, and maybe even as a thanks for me being a promotions kid, just because all of the higher ups are great and love to help out anybody at the.
They know what it's like. Yeah.
So they take a listen and they give you constructive criticism. But not only that, they're aware that you're there.
Mm-hmm. That's
So,
nice, yeah.
so yeah, right. So like we talked about being at the right place at the right time. It's like, or being at the right place and then waiting for the right time. And so that's exactly what I was
You got to be
doing.
ready for that time.
Right.
If you're unprepared, if you haven't mastered your craft, they're
Right.
gonna like, no, you got to work on it.
Right. So if I was a promotions assistant who also wanted to be on radio, but never knocked on anybody's doors and got constructive criticism on my reel, I wouldn't have gone back and edited it to a point where it was good enough that they'd be like, oh, we could put this kid on air. He's actually really good. And so Cat Thomas, he's the program director of The She, so he does everything from the programming of the music to the oversight of the personalities to in charge as the highest up of marketing for She.
Okay.
He called me up one day and basically, like, because I obviously every couple like weeks, months, I would check out and be like, hey, Cat, how's everything going? Just stay in touch. And he gave me my shot. Basically, he said, can you start like job training with our night personality and then be an on-air overnight radio personality for us? And so overnight's 12 to 6 a.m.
Okay.
So same thing, like mailroom job, like at the same time I'm getting paid an on-air wage hourly
Okay.
for the job, but I have to be able to come in at midnight, stay up till 6 a.m. and run the board and talk.
Yeah.
He said, is that something you're willing to do?
Right.
Which is like almost like a humbling thing to think, like he even asked me if it's something I'm willing to do.
See, do you think that's the same mindset that a lot of people have? Like, I know we know it. You and I both know it should be, but like,
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people are high maintenance, or not high maintenance, but they prioritize other things maybe over the pursuit of their passion.
maybe is it really their passion then?
How many people do you know that are like, I'm going to make a podcast and then never do anything?
Yeah.
Versus what you're doing right now. I can tell you, it's podcasts are the new avocados.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a podcast, and then they never actually do it.
Okay.
versus you made one and it's actually really great.
Thanks. It's all about taking action.
Right. And so you hear that from a lot of motivational speakers, is that like a lot of people talk about their dreams but never do anything about them.
Okay.
So yeah, taking action was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And I really love listening to, like, you know, whether it's like The Rock or Morgan Freeman, those motivational talks, especially right before I
Gary
work out.
Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, absolutely. Gary's
Right,
great. But that's a lot of it would be like, how bad do you want it?
Mm-hmm.
How much more do you want it than the other people in the room?
Right.
And how can you showcase that? I'm willing to sacrifice sleep for my, you know, professional dream.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it this way too. When I was at my media firm, I was like, okay, like I see myself paying my dues here. I see like the increments in which my salary is going to double.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 2 years down, I'll be making 60,000. 4 years down, I'd be making 100. 6 years down, 7 years down, I could be making 150, and so on and so on. But it's like, do I want to pay my dues here for that?
Right.
Like I see what I'm paying my dues for, what I would be getting in return. But is that worth it?
Is there a certain way to not to measure, but to foresee the potential? So maybe a better way to see it is, did you look at your boss as someone you'd want to be eventually?
Right.
Right.
So
and
yeah.
if that didn't fit your picture, then, you know, how much time do you give it before you call it quits?
Right. And it's dangerous too. I met a Midwest director of sales for a very cool fashion magazine, a guy's fashion magazine. I'm not going to say which one because I don't want to pinpoint him too much, but he was probably around 30 years old, just had a kid, and he kind of looked at me. He's like, "How old are you?" And I was 22 at the time. I was like, 22, and he's like, "Why are you here?" He's like, "You seem like a really like interesting, passionate kid. You have so much time before you can lock down and take a job that you'll be in for the rest of your life." And that got to me.
Yeah. Well, that's nice of him to say.
Yeah, absolutely. He's like, well, he basically, and then he said, like, I'm in my 30s. I now have dependents.
Yeah.
I have a mortgage. I have a child. I have a wife. And I'm the breadwinner, which is, whether orthodox or not, it's just what it is. I'm the breadwinner. I can't just up and leave my job because I don't love it. He's like, I like it. It's a really cool job, but I don't love it.
No, people depend on it.
Right. And if I was 22 and I had time to, like, you know, not have dependents and figure things out without debt, I would.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh my God, I'm 22. I don't have debts. Maybe I should try to figure it out. But yeah, so that's why I was like, okay, I got to find a job where my dues will pay off for something I really want. Yeah. And that was going back into the radio career.
And you're lucky to have parents that allow you to just like come back and do your thing,
right.
You know?
I'm 24. I live with my parents.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who live in the city. I luckily also live very close to the city. Mm-hmm. Which is a product of my dad being a small business owner in the city, needing to be close at any given time to his businesses. Mm-hmm. But the byproduct has been great that I've been close to my friends who have moved into the city, so I don't feel too pressured to move out. Right. And I'm saving upwards of, $12,000 a year because of it. Yeah. Right. So that I can basically be like, oh, I don't really like my job, but I'm also not a kid who's like, oh, but I'm already paying for rent in the city. Yeah. Can't quit my job now. I have rent to pay. Right. And so I feel like you get sucked in by the debts that you owe.
No, you're right.
Even student loans, you get stuck with student loans, which are easier to pay off if you live with your parents too. But you get stuck into student loans and the rent of the apartment, and then you get married, and then you just keep accumulating more debts. Right. Which I
feel like a lot of people our age get caught up in comparing to each other kind of thing, and like you measure success in oh, they bought a house, or they bought a car, or they have dogs, or whatever, or they're in the city now, they're in a skyscraper, whatever it is, and like
they bought a condo.
It's just this like rat race of like, you have this, well, I gotta one up you and do that, right? So we're both lucky. Like, I'm sure if I needed to move in, I'm sure I'd be welcome back home as well. So it gives you the opportunity and time to kind of navigate the waters. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean the lack of need to pay rent definitely was one of the big factors that led me to be able to leave the job that had a steady salary for the minimum wage promotional gig in Chicago, but for a really cool industry where I'd be paying my dues towards an avenue that I wanted to pursue. Yeah. And so far it's worked out pretty well. And obviously, when you work in a huge corporation, that avenue is a little more paved out with those timetables that I talked about. Like, oh, every 2 years you get a pay bump.
Yeah, it almost feels too structured.
Promotion. Yeah, it's right, absolutely. And that scared the hell out of me to think like, I know exactly what my life looks like for the next 40
Whereas
years.
on the flip side, a lot of people can't see that they should be eating shit for 2 years or 3 years, but they don't see this like uncapped or no ceiling potential
Right.
after you leave the mailroom or whatever.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, so it's whether or not it's worth the risk. Because at the end of the day, like same thing, if you're an actor, you might never actually get the shot.
Yeah.
And so you have to be willing to take that risk of really going after something you love and not attaining it, or not ever going after it and taking
You'll never
on
know
stability.
if you don't go after it.
Right, but you'll never know. So yeah,
No.
it's whether or not that question will like really kill you when you're like 80 years old.
Oh,
Um,
another Gary V.
oh
Kid
yeah,
that he's like, yeah. It's like if you need some gratitude, go to a nursing home and find out what they regret. In life.
yeah.
Bring
It's
perspective.
I find talking to those those who are in the generation and the generation above that, older than us, really insightful, right? Because you talk to 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, and you just kind of ask them for words of advice or things like, so what's the most important thing looking back? And very rarely do they say their career, or at least very rarely do the people who had regular business-esque jobs say their career. Most of the time I hear family, right? People are like, I just love that I've been able to see my family grow.
Yeah.
And hope that I get to stick around to see them grow even more.
Right.
You know, my legacy that I'm leaving behind.
Yeah.
And so part of me is like, that's amazing, but also I'm not hearing them talk about their jobs at all. Maybe I should go after a job I'm really passionate about.
It depends. It's like some people, when you say work-life balance, everyone has a different definition of work-life balance.
Right.
Some people have, no work-life balance because they love work,
Right.
and maybe they've found a significant other that is okay with that.
Yeah.
But if your work-life balance is more life than work, and you're just working to support a family, like that's cool too. So everyone
Yeah.
has a different definition.
I
It's
need
very
to find
subjective.
that old person that retired after being a pure work balance and ask them for their
Do you feel like
perspective.
a workaholic right now?
I don't actually. I feel like I'm all over the place and pursuing a ton of different avenues I'm intrigued by. But I would love to meet somebody who's like maybe a tax accountant who literally only works for 70 years, who didn't really pay attention to family and see what their idea was, like was it worth it, or like words of wisdom, what they thought about it, versus maybe the opposite of being more family driven. Yeah, I don't know. I want to be learning at all times back to like if my work life balance, or pursuing more than one thing.
Yeah.
Like you're doing obviously more than one thing right
Yeah.
now. And I think that's what keeps life fun.
Yeah.
If you're an actor, maybe try improv or voiceover, or like always be going to classes for something.
Right. Right.
Like right now I'm actually working on voiceover representation to get more commercial voiceover
Okay.
stuff in Chicago.
Yeah.
Because outside of radio, that's a big part of it. A lot of radio personalities do voiceover work, which makes sense. They kind of go hand in hand. Half of our commercials are recorded by voiceover actors.
Okay.
But more so, like there's one guy from 97 The Drive who I think most kids our age would recognize his voice. His name's Steve Downs, and he was the voice for Master Chief in Halo.
Oh, nice.
Right, so that's one of those things, like if that you hear that, you're like, why do I know your voice? Like that would be really cool to look back and have that legacy of like, yeah, millions of kids know my voice because I was the voice behind their favorite character in their favorite game.
That's
growing
really
up.
cool.
Yeah, so that's like a little bit of a side dream for me.
It's one thing to recognize an actor from your favorite TV show or movie, but it's another to
Right.
not even like recognize the face, but someone's voice.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
like one.
The funniest thing is like kids would be like,
you're
yeah,
doing
I was riding in the bus to like high school, and my bus driver always kept 97 The Drive on, and they're like, we were listening, we're like, why do we recognize this morning show personality's voice? You're like, you're a high schooler who's like messing around and not listening to classic rock station, but his
Yeah,
voice,
yeah.
and your bus driver's keeping it on. So that's really cool to put two and two together there. But yeah, I mean, it's like you always recognize Antonio Banderas as like the B voice in like the Nazen X commercial, or
Yeah.
there's a lot of those too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I pay close attention to that. Or, I think another cool avenue would be the curation of music behind advertisements and TV. So you ever watch a movie and you're like, this soundtrack was amazing. Like, I kind of want to buy the soundtrack.
Yeah.
To be that person who's in charge of deciding which music goes into the movie at different parts to
Right,
narrate
right,
the
right.
emotion of the film.
Right.
Or same thing for advertising. Like that's actually that was my mailroom moment for the media firm I was working in. I was like, oh, I'm gonna work here, and then I'm gonna figure out how to get into that job where I choose the music behind the commercials,
Yeah.
because that's my real passion.
Oh, is it?
or that was like my real passion within advertising. If I was going
Oh,
to do
sure,
something
sure.
advertising
If you
based.
stayed, yeah,
Yeah.
stayed in there.
I would love to do both. I'd love to be the person who chooses the music behind advertisements and be an honored personality. I think if I had to choose, I'd probably choose the music behind movies over
Really?
advertising first. Yeah. Like I think I've got 500 Days of Summer's soundtrack on vinyl
I
here.
still have to watch that.
But yeah, I think that's, I don't know. I think as a music lover, that's something that I've always been really intrigued by.
Yeah. So going back to making that tape that you wanted them to hear,
Yeah.
what would be a good sample like material to put on a tape, a demo tape?
Definitely if you have real work from radio stations that you've been on. So like if you've been on a small student-run station, even that's not commercial, or one that's like, you know, just some online station that maybe has 10 listeners, like just have that. Have those samples to pull from to show people. Because regardless of the audience, it's still going to be able to showcase your skill set.
Yeah.
And your sound, your cadence, whatever. Might, you know, show you as appetizing or potential asset to the company you're working for.
So I'm sure I know the answer to this, but like cadence as well as the personality behind it, right? So like if you're trying to go for a certain persona or a certain radio station and you know what they want to represent, you kind of like model that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And to some extent, you don't want to seem like the same as the rest of the pack.
Yeah, that too.
You could think of it that way, but at the same time, if it's a big radio station, generally every single personality is going to have something cool about them.
Okay.
If not more than one thing that's cool about them, regardless, you know, just their sound, their humor, their, you know, quickness on the spot.
Right.
And I know a lot of personalities who actually talk about they've done improv, whether it was at IO or Annoyance or
Okay.
Second City, and they say it helps a ton because it's your ability to think on your feet.
Yeah.
Just what you want to talk about or what might be funny.
Yeah.
You know, just outside of just covering like news and pop culture.
Were you nervous at all?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, it's so shaky. And Rob Rose, who's our morning show producer, was the one I was shadowing before I first went on, like the first couple of weeks, and he was so great because he'd be like, "All right, you want to try it now?" And I'd be like, "Wait, this is my first day, like watching you shadow." Like, and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." He's like, and he like tell her nervous. He's like, I'll leave the studio for a minute. I'll just let you press it.
Oh, that's a good guy. Good
Yeah,
mentor.
absolutely. To recognize that.
Yeah.
The comfortability level is great. And finally, you know, like took me maybe 4 months to be okay with having other people.
4 months, huh?
Well, I don't know. That's
even by yourself.
Guesstimate.
Even by yourself. Like, when did you start feeling comfortable?
Oh, I mean, comfortable probably after the first couple of
Hours or
first couple
Nice.
of hours. But at the same time, you can still tell like my first couple months on air versus my couple months after that are different for sure. You know, maybe because you settle into the role more, you kind of like have felt out how the station works.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you've gotten to know the music, especially with commercial radio stations. You play a lot of the same music, and it stays on your station for a while.
Yeah.
So you get to like really know how long the intro is to that song. So how long can I talk and then end perfectly so that the lyrics to this song starts right after I stop. Yeah. That's really fun. Or the same thing, like, okay, knowing like this Taylor Swift song, it has like 5 seconds at the end where it's just the instrumental. So you can we call them the pots, which is just the way that you bring down the level of the volume for that track. So you bring down the level of the volume, start talking over it and into the next track at the same time, perfectly time it out.
Yeah.
And our station's a lot more like that, where it's like, how clean can you be with connecting the songs, fading in and out and talking over it while it's like just tight.
Right.
Versus some other stations are maybe a little more long form, where the personalities talk a little bit longer.
Right. So with you said commercial radio stations, like how, I'm guessing the songs are pre-selected, but like how often do they rotate or how often do they switch it up?
It's not that often. I mean, I feel like most people's gripe is that like commercial radio stations don't change their songs enough. If so, but at least non-top 40 commercial stations, it might be, you know, every couple of months, like quarterly almost. Versus maybe if you're a top 40 station in a big city, you actually, if there's a new song that's popular out, you got to put it on because that's your calling card.
Yeah.
If you're the Mix or B96 or 103.5 Kiss FM, you gotta
requests and things like that.
I would say actually commercial stations don't have request stuff that often, but if somebody calls in and requests something and it is something we kind of play, you'll just be like, oh yeah, it's coming up soon, really, to that extent. But yeah, I mean, that's unless you've got that kind of power bestowed upon you from the program director or music director of your station, that's generally not in your.
So I mean, you would think like someone that wants to become a DJ has a very big creative aspect to them. Do you feel like you'd be like limited or like bottled into like,
Yeah,
as far as like your creative freedom?
Yeah, and even in Champaign when I was on air for the WPGU, that was the same thing where it was a music director controlled station, and I actually became the music director eventually because I wanted that control. And I definitely updated the songs more frequently than somebody would, even at a top 40 station, because I was super into like listening to the song that just came out and deciding. Me and my program director would meet weekly and talk about what new songs on the charts should make it, what their category should be.
Why can't they be
how
a little
often
more
they
like
should
that, like a little more experimental and less like they don't rotate it because they want to play it safe, right? They know what's hot or what has been successful over time, but there's a lot of good music out there.
There's a lot of money on the line, right? You think about it, like listenership equals dollar signs.
Yeah.
And not only that, but if you can curate your station to a specific age group and demographic, then your advertisers can buy into like, oh, like we're selling this type of minivan and we want to sell it to this age demographic and this gender. This station is the best in terms of its listenership for that demographic.
So that they have the ad agencies in mind, or like the companies that they're
absolutely
trying to promote.
And so it's easy to say, like, if you're a certain type of business, which station you should be buying with because they have the demographic that's most likely to buy your stuff.
It's interesting.
But in that same field of thought of like, why don't they change songs more often? You also think about it. So how, on average, somebody in a car or just with an FM radio, how long are they really listening for? An hour, hour and a half at most.
Well, when I was working on the ambulance all the time.
So yeah, first responders are different.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. And I'll talk to police officers who said the same way. I listened to you for 7 hours straight. And I'm like, that's awesome. Also, you must hate Pink because we play her 3 times, every hour. 3 times in it? Not 3 times in it. We probably play Pink every hour to every other hour. So yeah, outside of first responders are people who spend, their day in cars.
Yeah, truckers,
Uber drivers even.
Yeah.
Commuters are really only in their cars for hour to 2 hour longest. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, so we don't know which hour they're going to be in there outside of like, the rush hours.
Sure.
So we just want to play the songs they really want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why you hear a song. If you're in the car for a road trip or you're in the car for an extended period of time, you're like, I heard the song twice already. And that's because it's like, unfortunately, not curated to you. It's curated to the person who's only in the car for an hour or two. Right. And that, and that's plays in with the money.
Yeah, follow the money.
Which is a crazy thing. Like, it is an organization. People do work there full time that need to get their salaries paid. Where does that money come from? It comes from the advertisers.
That's true, I guess. Yeah.
And you're selling an audience.
Yeah.
Which is cool because that gets into like, new age media like Spotify, YouTube, streaming stuff is also selling an audience.
Right. So that was kind of like my next question is like, have you, in the time you spent there, like, have you noticed things like getting smaller or shrinking? Because like, what effect has Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Sirius XM, like those, or like even like Bluetooth in the car? Like, why would I listen to a radio if I can just like Bluetooth the music that I have?
So the easy responses are obviously like, oh, well, then you have to use your Bluetooth. And also a lot of the services are premium if you want to use them without Wi-Fi. And radio is free.
Yeah.
So that's the easy, like, it's a legacy media. It's always free in your car. You don't have to pay for radio.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it's surprisingly not shrinking the way people think.
Okay.
Crazy enough.
That's good to hear.
And that's partially because of the user engagement. So, tons of advertising studies are done every day on different media platforms and how engaged people are when they're interacting with them.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is like, okay, like if you see an ad on your Instagram as you're scrolling through, you're probably also listening to music, maybe like you're on a train somewhere. So you've got like all of this information coming in from different places and you're really not paying attention to that ad versus when you have the radio on. And, your favorite on-air personality is like, this hour is brought to you by, like, JCPenney. You hear it.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, yeah, I was actually in JCPenney. I just got some dope boots that are perfect for Chicago winter. Your engagement there, like, your actual, the listenership there is a lot more involved.
Yeah.
and so they say like the click through or like the actual purchase
Call to action.
Yeah, the call to action and the
Yeah.
purchase decision of those listeners is a lot higher
Yeah.
than those coming from other media platforms.
Yeah,
Or,
the
like, I don't know
attention's
about-
more focused.
Right,
Yeah.
and I don't know about you, but like with Spotify or Pandora, should they ever be on in my vicinity, like everyone turns the volume down when the ads go on.
Really?
Yeah, or they like get annoyed, or people pay like specifically for the premium memberships to those streaming platforms
Right.
to not hear advertising at all.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, if they do have advertisements that help fund the platform, people aren't engaged with them at all.
Right. Right.
Versus because of the sense of community and local radio, people
Yeah.
are a lot more engaged.
Right. What has been your favorite part of being a DJ?
Oh, it's dope. I don't know. It's got to be the thought that like even though you might be alone in a studio, you're narrating the ride home,
Oh.
the commute for so many people.
I like that.
Right? You're bringing a little bit of positivity to maybe something that's not otherwise a comfortable thing.
Yeah.
Like driving's never like driving without radio. Sometimes silence is actually like sometimes silence is peaceful, but a lot of time if you're stuck in traffic or you have a long commute,
Yeah.
seeing what's on the radio is really like something that brightens up the drive.
Yeah.
Or even if you're not driving, if you're listening to us on Alexa or just via your laptop, the fact that you could bring this like tidbit of knowledge or culture or just something cool that a listener didn't know to them is super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The
Yeah,
fact that you
yeah.
can divulge that type of information or tell them that type of thing
Yeah.
is really great.
So that's funny. So it's not being, a potential celebrity like radio DJ, or it's not like maybe all the celebrities that you might even come across. It's being able to speak to people, I guess, like
Yeah.
the common people, like the people
Yeah.
that are actually listening.
I remember being in like 8th grade, 7th grade Greek history. It was like Greek and Roman mythology, and my history teacher was an awesome guy. Shout out Mr. O'Brien from a Kraken middle school. He was talking about how back in ancient times, being a storyteller was like a very high-end profession.
Yeah.
People get paid a lot of money, or you had a lot of stature
Right.
for being the storyteller of the town. What does a storyteller get paid right now in modern society?
Yeah.
Or it's like, what is a storyteller? And so I thought like radio host is one of those modern storyteller type roles.
Oh.
So full circle, it's just like, okay, how do I like actually make a career or make a life out of telling stories? And radio is that avenue
Yeah.
for me, or voiceover, or I'm a represented actor in Chicago.
Yeah.
Have an agent. I go out on auditions.
Really.
That's fun too. That's one of those side passions.
Oh.
I take classes. So it's like, but they're all involved in the thought, like, how do I be a storyteller?
Right.
And that's where the gratification comes in. It's like, okay, this is where I want to pay my dues.
Oh.
Even if I'm, paying for acting classes and not getting roles right now.
Right.
If there is that risk reward, the reward is that this happens, I'm able to tell that story. It's worth it
Right.
to me.
Dang. Okay. So with acting, like, what have you've done some extra work?
Yeah,
Work as an extra.
I started actually before I had representation as an agent in Chicago. That's a good way to do it for anybody looking to like just kind of figure out the acting scene in Chicago, just as like a first step to dip your feet, as well as taking classes. Extra work's a good way to get on set. Same thing, it's minimum wage most of the time in Chicago. Still cool because you get to be on set for some of the biggest shows in the world. But yeah, I mean, to some extent, you are treated. You're the background. You help fill out the scene to make the story work.
Yeah.
Cooler role, even so, I moved up and was a stand-in.
Okay.
So I've stood in on Empire. I've stood in on Chicago PD. I stood in.
Was it for John Cena?
John Cena, yeah, is one of the guys I stand in for.
Guy
a lot.
just like the back of your head looks like him. Or
Right.
So by
So
stand-in, is
similar.
it the front of the head, front of the face too, or
yeah,
back?
it's skin tone, facial hair color, height,
Oh, okay.
and stature overall.
Yeah.
So basically, in front of the camera, you have to fill out the same amount of the camera as him, but also be able to showcase the way the lighting would look on him, as well as act as him, do the character's lines, so that the cameraman can figure out how to film the scene around you.
Yeah.
Because they're not keeping Tom Cruise on the floor for 3 hours while they try to figure out how to film this intense action scene. They're gonna keep his standing there.
Really?
Tom Cruise is gonna be chilling.
If I
in
was
his
Tom
trailer.
Cruise, I'd be like, take all the time. I'm gonna keep
Man.
my humility for
People don't realize though, like your favorite stuff you like to watch, TV, film, whatever, like that one little shot of them talking in like the kitchen took 3 hours, 4 hours
Uh-huh.
to film. You know,
Yeah.
people are on set for 16-hour days
Wow.
to get, you know, not even a fourth of an episode done
Yeah.
for some of these shows. There's so much that goes into it. Like there's so many people on set for lighting, sound, you know, set design, everything, and so much respect to that industry because of the work I've done in it. Just being able to be aware of how much work goes into everything.
So if you could choose one, actor or voice stuff,
Ooh, I would hope
which
that
one's more fulfilling?
I would hope that I never have to choose.
Oh,
Just because
man.
you have so many actors who do everything. Like, you know, Dax Shepard has a podcast and is Dax Shepard the actor at the same time, and probably
Really?
does voiceover behind commercials.
Wow.
So it all seems like packed into one acting,
Yeah.
you know, package where you can do acting, you can do
That's
voiceover, you
amazing.
can do radio, or like, you know, you got Howard Stern. Obviously, is like one of the biggest radio personalities in the world ever, and also is a lot of the time a personality and a judge on TV shows like American Idol.
Yeah.
So the hope is that you get to do the thing you're really great at and love, but also be able to branch out and do a lot more.
So
too.
with Howard Stern, is it a love-hate relationship with some from Radio DJs for him? Has he
Yeah.
changed the game? Like has he because he's Howard Stern and the things he might say, like does that change what you can say on the radio?
No, I mean he definitely. I can't remember the stat like on how much stations that broadcast Howard Stern had to pay in fines when he was still on FM and they were syndicating him. But maybe that's changed the way that the rules that govern the FCC in terms of what radio broadcasters can say. Maybe they've eased up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely changed the game in the fact that he's made XM Sirius the giant that it is,
Right.
and a potential option for people where a lot of people do think like, oh yeah, I could pay for a subscription for this.
Yeah, I don't think I will. I am not
Yeah.
obviously, but
You know, it's funny because when I was working in promotions, they had just gotten a new promotion car for one of our stations, and so it had a trial on it, and we would occasionally tune into Howard Stern, and we wouldn't tune into the stations for music most of the time unless it was a station that didn't exist in the Chicago market otherwise. Like there's a great coffee house playlist on XM Sirius. Outside of that, like it was great. It was cool to hear the artist interviews.
okay.
But that also means you're going to this platform for a different type of content that you're going to an FM radio station for.
Yeah.
FM radio station, you're going for, you know, mostly music, and then
Right.
in the morning show, like conversation.
Right.
But if you're tuning into Howard Stern on XM Sirius, you're presuming he's gonna have someone really cool he's interviewing.
Yeah. Which is what a lot of podcasts are doing
Right.
these days.
So
right?
so I don't think podcasts or, you know, those XM Sirius talk shows are really butting into the FM radio
'Cause it's
station
different.
world because it is different.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think they both provide different things to the audience.
Yeah.
That's the
So
hope.
you feel like, I don't know if you do, I think you do, but like creative freedom as the DJ. So between sets, what do you like to normally share?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely where you find the differences between personalities outside of their voice, outside of the way they sound and their delivery, will be on what they decide to share.
Yeah.
Um,
So how in depth, how personal are we getting?
I like to be really local.
Oh.
A lot of the time, if I have to choose between news on something culturally relevant to Chicago and something, you know, just like more U.S. based, then I choose
'Cause
Chicago.
you don't get that in podcasts.
Right, and so you know, all over the country you can hear people syndicating someone like Ryan Seacrest. You know, it's like half of the radio markets in the country might just use. You can get him on your iHeart radio station.
Right.
But he's not going to say anything relevant to Chicago
Right.
because he's not here.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, what can I bring as a small time
I love
Chicago
that.
radio host, and local news
Yeah.
is obvious, or local culture is really part of it.
Right. Right.
And I obviously have to thank like the other medians of Chicago that are local news, like from the Tribune to the Red Eye to, you know, just Instagram and following people who I think are culturally relevant to the Chicago scene and seeing what they share
Right.
as the avenues in which I get the information that I share too.
Right. Right.
And part of like, you know, the thought of how good of an asset are you is like how quickly can you find information that people haven't already heard,
You're right.
or breaking news type
Yeah.
of stuff to be able to share to them, or things they just haven't heard before.
Right. Right. So going to your name Dash, how did it become Dash?
Yeah, so that's really funny. It's a weird story. My girlfriend's family started calling me Jordash because my name's Jordan. And there was a brand, I don't think it exists anymore. It's like Jordash jeans and leather. But so they just started calling me Jordash, and then for short, they started calling me Dash. And I'd already had reels made under just my regular name because in college I went by Jordan Weiss on air. I'd be like, "What up, guys? It's your music director, Jordan Weiss. It's WPGU 107.1." And that's just the way it was. But so I just and I'd already brought these reels to Kat Thomas and 97 The Drive's program director, who's really great, Rob, and just gotten their input. But after talking to Kat for a while, who's the She program director, where I'm on air, I found out his name's not actually Kat Thomas.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and a lot of program directors were on-air personalities.
Oh, and they just
at some
kept
point,
it, huh?
big on-air personalities, and
Yeah,
then they
yeah.
moved into the program director roles. And so I found out he had a program director change his name to Kat Thomas when he got promoted to an even bigger radio station, like moving to a different state. He was like going to be the main
Because that's what people come to know him as, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And lots of performers, lots of artists take stage names.
Right, right.
So, I mean, why should radio be that different? But so I decided to start making, or like with my next reel, after I'd gotten criticism, constructive criticism, I decided to do it as Dash.
Not Jordash?
Right, not Jordash. and I thought of it kind of like almost even a nice homage to the fact that the guy I'm trying to get on air with also had changed his name for radio. And one of our main afternoon personalities, great guy, Jay Styles, is awesome as well. Had changed his name he has a radio name. And I don't know if that contributed at all to the fact that I got on air, outside of the fact that I was already in front of this guy. He knew I was qualified enough and trainable and ready to be on air. But it's certainly fun to think that it might have.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's weird. I never had a nickname growing up. I get like,
Not
you know,
even, like,
people be like,
Jor-
"What up, J
the obvious-
Dubs?" or
Oh,
like,
okay.
like that type of stuff occasionally, but not like one where it was like, "That's your new name." And so it's funny now to meet people at the company who I hadn't met beforehand who just know me as Dash. They're like, "What's up, Dash?" And I'm like, "This is weird, man."
Well, just embrace it. I'm sure.
Right.
You know,
And
just
I feel
embrace
bad because Whip, who at Eric in the Morning with Melissa and Whip, which is literally we share a wall. We share a wall with 97 The Drive and then a wall with 101.9 The Mix because that's our company
it. Wow.
in Chicago. And I think back, I'm like, wow, that's been your life. Like, people only know you as Whip. Like, I have no idea what your first name is. I know it now, it's Brian. But,
Right.
like, like, literally all over, people meet him out in public places. And they're like, "Oh, my God, Whip, nice to meet you." Like,
Right,
that's
right,
an
right,
odd
right,
thing to think
right.
that you have this, like, alter ego or just other
Yeah.
personality that you, or just name even that you go by.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome. I love that.
yeah, so it was a fun trajectory. And I'm no longer on air overnights, which is bittersweet as well.
Oh, you're not? Oh, I didn't know that.
No, I'm 6 to midnight now on Saturdays,
for you,
Sundays,
dude.
and fill-in.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Or better pay or same pay or?
No pay bump yet. I
Okay.
just too humbly appreciative to even think about asking.
Sure, sure.
Or nor do I think it matters at this point. Still living at home. Not trying to buy a Mercedes yet. I don't know if I will. But yeah, I mean, I'm just happy, obviously, because it's a bump in career, and so that's something to decide too. Like, what's more important, is being more qualified or getting more pay? And like, now that I've worked a 6 to midnight personality, or I work 6 to midnight personalities, I'm more qualified.
You're building leverage
Right.
for maybe if you wanted to move up in that company or another
Right.
radio station.
Right. So yeah, a 6 to midnight personality might be looked at as a little more primed to be the next morning show than like maybe an overnight personality.
And have you noticed it as such?
I think so. I mean, there's definitely more recognition.
Okay.
The listenership is obviously higher during the 6 p.m. hour than it is at midnight or 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not true, because that was maybe the coolest part about my midnight to 6 a.m. overnight
Just
shift
like
was that.
a small knit,
Yeah.
like tight knit.
Yeah, there was that little bit of like 5 a.m. hour where a lot of people were waking up and getting in their cars. So I felt like I had the beginning of the commuter rush.
Oh, there you
And that
go.
was like my time to shine.
Yeah,
Even though I was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
exhausted because I'd been up from midnight to 5 a.m. already. But that's why you drink more coffee, and the station provides free coffee.
There you go.
Bless up.
There you go.
Free coffee. Huge, especially to be a radio personality. And that's something you're torn between now too, because like I'll hit the 11 p.m. hour and be like, oh, like I'm feeling a little sluggish, and so I'll drink another cup of coffee, which is great. I sound great and energized in my next shifts. All my shifts are like all my breaks for the next hour, but then I get off of air and I'm like still wired until 4 a.m. I can't go to sleep. But obviously, the trade-off, same thing we talked about, trade-off, it's worth it to do a better job and lose sleep and figure it out later, because it's your career, it's your passion.
Yeah. So if you could kind of curate your own show, or maybe there's a show out there, another station a dream station, do you have one in mind? Like what tidbits what would be the dream radio show? Would you have a game show on there? Would you like what like
Definitely just be a morning show personality is the dream.
Okay.
On a radio station of the stature that I'm at now, or people don't realize that She 100.3 is one of the top 10 radio stations in Chicago.
Okay.
Which it's a newer. We rebranded a couple years back. It used to be Love FM. So the name recognition's not as there as it is with like a 97.1 The Drive or 101.9 The Mix, but in terms of listenership, the new She's right there. And crazy enough, growing up in Chicago, it's not the same for the stations that were big when I was younger. Like B96 is no longer even like the top 15
Really
for listenership.
What's XRT?
XRT's up there. It's always in the top 10. They're great. I mean, and you think about it, because of their demographic, they haven't gone down. Like the age demographic they cater to is a little bit older.
Yeah.
So not people who are adapting to new media as fast.
They just have a good variety.
They do too. They also have a great mix where they play some oldies, they play some new stuff, and they fill a small segment that is they play like the indie acoustic new stuff in Chicago. And what other station does that?
They would I've seen some of them come out and introduce artists at like concerts and stuff like that. That'd be awesome. Like, no, that's Dash. Like, he's introducing like Cage the Elephant or like whoever, you know.
Yeah,
like...
and they do that. The Mix gets to do that too, which is really great. She is getting there. Like, I was at a Mix event a year ago where Kaz and Jen were talking at a Kelly Clarkson, Andy Grammer concert, and it was presented by the Mix, and it was benefited like Children's Hospital.
There you go.
So there's a lot of power there. Or like even when I was in promotions for 97.1 The Drive, I got to MC the 5K for ending Alzheimer's in Montrose Beach.
Wow.
And like I was the MC for a lot of stuff up until Alan Kraszewski took over, who's the main ABC7 news anchor.
Oh yeah.
And presented like, you know, all these important political people from Jan Schakowsky to Dick Durbin to Daniel Biss and what have you. So
that's so cool.
There are a lot of really cool opportunities as a radio host that aren't necessarily just you talking on the radio.
No, you're right. You get to Yeah.
Sherman and Tingle, 97.1 The Drive's morning show guys, who are like big brothers to me. Both of them, they're awesome. Love seeing them. One of my favorite things was in the morning after my overnights is that I get to see Sherman and Tingle just to say what's up, because they were these guys that I was like the promotions kid. I would show up with the car and all the stuff and set it up, and they would do like these games with all the listeners. So I just did that for a year and just became really close with them. But they get to do that. They do this thing called Thirsty Thursday. Every Thursday they're at a different bar in Chicago, and they play games with listeners and give out tickets and gear and stuff like that, and just have like a really good time. And they're just drink deals, so everybody's happy.
Right.
So yeah, and we also we have personalities who do podcasts with the station.
Oh, okay.
So the station is adapting too.
Okay, that's good.
I can't remember the stat, but I know that like a good amount of our revenue also comes from digital.
Okay.
And whether that's people listening to us digitally,
like on the computer, or
have an
iHeart
app.
Yeah.
Even.
Okay. Yeah. iHeartRadio.
Yeah. So iHeartRadio is the mother company for 103.5 and a couple other big stations all across the U.S.
They're big, right? Yeah.
They basically own Ryan Seacrest.
What is it, like Clear Channel?
So no, that's iHeart.
Oh, that's
itself.
iHeart. Oh,
that's actually the name of it. And they're trying to do their own radio awards and stuff too. And I've heard that they filed for bankruptcy, but that's so as Cumulus. Not yet. I think Cumulus did too. That's why they sold the Loop.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And CBS just merged with Entercom, so now they're called Entercom in Chicago. It's not CBS Radio anymore. So yeah, a lot of mother companies aren't doing that well financially, but luckily the company that owns mine, Hubbard Broadcasting, is a smaller private company.
Yeah.
Only owns 3 stations, isn't in that many markets, so isn't stretched too thin.
Yeah.
Has been pretty great.
Right.
So far, and they treat everybody great.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a salaried employee, but I have a 401k with them.
That's weird.
Yeah, even though I only work so many hours a week, just because they care.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
I mean, is there anything that it doesn't sound like it, but is there anything that you would love to change about it?
Um, yes and no. Without changing the medium, it would be hard. And it's adapting too, so it would be like saying that I want to change something might just be something that hasn't happened yet that they're doing.
Oh.
And a lot of the stations are adapting to their social media content
Okay.
creation. So that's, they'll have social media managers at the stations, but a lot of stations could get better at maybe like being their own types of BuzzFeed, in terms of creating that type of content.
Yeah.
And maybe the problem there is that you have these media creating websites like BuzzFeed that already kind of have a monopoly on the situation, where like that's already what shows up on your news feed because it's somehow already gone viral.
Right.
But if it was kind of a fair distribution, it would be cool if like like all the different Chicago stations were just as easily able to get like cool little content they've made out 5 minutes of like, best hot dog place in Chicago type of thing to the public,
Yeah.
people that actually care about it.
Yeah. When I think of XRT, I probably think of Terry Hemmert with like Breakfast with the Beatles.
Yeah.
And
Terry's awesome to listen
who's
to.
Lynn
Lynn
Bramer,
Bramer.
and like Lynn's Bin and things like that. Like these are segments that I like look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is awesome. And like, I don't know, if I was, and I'm sure you are thinking about like things that like that Dash is known for.
Mm-hmm.
And that, Dash is gonna be on at 6 p.m. I want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah. I think artist interviews would be huge. So that's obviously crossing back into like, well, that's what Howard Stern does, and you said it was different. To be able to make it short and digestible enough to sneak into a talk break in between music would be insane.
Maybe like
really
a pre-recorded interview.
Yeah. Or at the same time, that's where the opportunity comes in to do podcasts. So the afternoon show for 97.1 The Drive is Steve Seaver and Janda. And Janda has a really cool like 10-minute podcast that she comes out with maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly.
A 10-minute podcast?
Might be less.
Wow.
Some of them, and it's just called Behind the Music, and it'll literally just be like on one song. So she did one on Africa by Toto, and it just like runs through like the quickest points and describes like everything that went on to create the song Africa.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool. So like that's something where not only is it relevant to an audience you can already target through your radio station and talk about, for free through your radio station. Hey, listen to this podcast. It's also different, and you're like evolving as a radio station at the same time.
No, you're creating a personality.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. So that's really cool. I mean, and then obviously there are the radio hours that are syndicated that are great. And also not syndicated. So like,
can people tell? You can tell, right?
If I can tell, but like if you're not listening to it, you just like be like, oh, it's just not like that specific to us.
Okay.
Ryan Seegers is talking through the top 10 tracks of the week. Like that could be in any state and nobody would notice. But you get like Bob Stroud does a really cool 10 at 10, like 10 songs at 10 a.m. that like all follow a certain pathway, like 1968 or something like that. Or there's Rock and Roll Roots is another one too. So yeah, to be able to host one of those hours where you're curating the music, so like actually being able to express the creativity is like your knowledge of music.
Yeah.
And then also talk through it and like really cool bits about it is awesome as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, XRT is great because their beauty comes from the fact that they do talk long form about a lot of songs, but in a way that's like maybe it's just like
you can just tell they're into it. You know?
Yeah, they're super into it, and you can tell by the way they talk about it. Like it's something they're super passionate about. Absolutely.
Enough to make you Google them. Like, who does this guy look like?
Yeah, and it's never what you thought. They never look like we thought. Jason Thomas or whoever else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny too because it is such a small scene in Chicago. Like everybody's kind of seeing each other. Or, like a lot of our stations are all in the same building. XRT's in my building.
Get out of here! That's
like,
awesome.
I think B96 is in my building too. Like we're all like half of us are out of the Prudential. Half of the biggest
Prudential building
radio stations in Chicago are out of the Prudential building.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's why we're so high security. No, we check in at the front. That's about it. And then I think Q101, not Q101, WKQX is their name now. Is out of the MBC Tower. On Michigan, or right off Michigan.
Yeah.
And the Loop used to be there as well. Rest in peace to the greatness that was that radio station. So yeah, I think that's a misconception when stations do disappear, is that it's because they weren't doing well enough or radio's dying. But no, like with that situation, it's like, like the mother company went bankrupt and the Loop was like a really prime asset to sell. They got money for it. But outside of that, like Chicago as a radio station market's doing great.
Okay.
There's a
Okay.
lot of money
good to
to
hear.
be spent on radio station advertising that will in turn bring more money back to the people that spent it.
Yeah,
For sure.
when you talk about ads, like I think you talk about moving away from television vision commercials and more
Right.
towards social media, but it's interesting to hear that radio's still thriving.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that you said that your attention is not as split.
Right. Yeah, it comes down to like how many forms of media you're paying attention to
Yeah.
when you see that ad a lot of the time,
Yeah.
and user engagement when they interact or hear that ad.
Right,
And so television, same thing. You switch the channels, or you go back to like as soon as the television ads start, you pick up your phone.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Just like when you're
Um,
driving, hopefully you're not on your phone. Like really, the only thing you can do except for pay attention to the road is listen to the
Hopefully,
radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, right. And maybe the kids that unfortunately are looking at their phone sometimes like aren't listening to radio anyway or something
Right,
like that.
right.
But yeah, I mean that's why the demographic comes into huge play for sure.
Okay.
And
That's
I think
cool.
that's why some radio stations that cater to younger demographics are struggling, like B96.
Mm,
So they just got rid of 2 of their bigger personalities in the past week.
ouch.
And that's hard too. It's like, okay, do you blame the personalities for a drop in listenership? Is it a music director problem? Like what?
Yeah, from the outsider's perspective, you'll never really know.
Right. You can't. And even from the insiders, like if listenership drops, you can guess at like what's changed per se, but I feel like sometimes people just
Or
get
maybe lack
scapegoated.
of change. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it could just be a costing. Like maybe
Yep.
you've gotten promoted too much to the point where you cost too much, and there's some other young kid who will do it for half as much.
Well, I read this today that like some DJs let their fame go to their head almost.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, contract negotiations when they come and the money you ask for can for sure influence whether or not you get brought back in or whatever else. There's tons of scandals in terms of people leaving, people not getting paid the same as their co-hosts,
Yeah.
if they should be getting the same as their co-host, stuff like that. That all can go to people's heads, or also just end in ways that also end careers, unfortunately,
Okay.
or just redirect careers. But yeah, there's cool like endorsement things you can do as a radio personality too. Like I already got LASIK from a certain company, so if I got big enough as a radio personality, sure, of course I'd endorse them for money. Like I'd be like, this isn't even because they paid me, I just already got it done there. Like
Dang.
so there's that type of thing. There's doing events that are sponsored by like, some beer company, or there's just a lot of avenues for revenue that are tied into the radio world to the point where it can't die because they're already like the roots
Yeah.
are sunk into the emerging media world.
Right.
Or at least the companies that have been smart about it are.
Interesting. So for someone that wants to take the plunge into the radio world, and we've already stated that you have to be ready for the right time and the right moment. But is there anything that looking back you would have liked to add or maybe take away on your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely like. I'm thinking about like J.K. Simmons when he won, I think, an Oscar, and he said like, "Do not do this unless like you can't see yourself doing anything else." Right? Because it is one of those industries where like you might fail, and there are other comfortable things in terms of finances that
So
you
you have
could
to be able to
doing.
eat shit. Yeah.
Right. For lack of better words, yeah. You have to be able to like be there in the trenches and maybe not leave. But yeah, you'd have to be able to pay the dues, and hopefully they'll pay off.
Gotcha.
Are
Are there certain positions that can help get someone's foot in the door into the radio world besides the mailroom?
Yeah, I mean, so the promotions assistant is obviously like if you're a personable person, a lot of times it's easy to get into like you can be somebody they can use for marketing
Okay.
at a minimum wage price.
Okay.
And your experience is like just because you're a promotions assistant, your experience isn't going to be nearly the same as a different promotions assistant. It's all up to you. Like if you ask if you can just come in and shadow in the morning show, like be a fly on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Worst case, they say no.
Yeah. You have to ask.
Right. And a lot of the time they'd be like, absolutely. Like if you're not going to like I don't know, if you're not going to do anything to the situation, if you're going to be a fly on the wall somewhere, of course you can just sit there and be a sponge and learn. And then maybe while you're there, they'll be like, hey, can you pick up the phone and actually like answer some of the calls for us? And then all of a sudden you're like kind of assisting the producer of a morning show, and you kind of get to put that on a resume.
Wow.
And you get to ask those personalities for advice, and they can refer you because they know your work ethic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of it's not is not being afraid to ask.
Okay.
And I still feel that way when I want to like you're almost embarrassed, or you stop yourself from being able to do things because it's out of your comfort zone. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to bother them.
Right.
I don't want it to hurt me because I did bother them or their opinion of me. But at the same time, it's like, well, you gotta,
No one's gonna hold your hand either.
right. As the Hamilton play said, like, you gotta take your shot.
Right.
And that's where it comes from. I definitely have friends who like just were in the right place, but then they still didn't do that extra little thing that they're supposed to do, like talk to the program director or like submit their tape or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. Do you know? Is there anyone in the industry that isn't maybe college educated? Like, do you need college? Do you need a background in communications or broadcast communications to do this?
I would say no. If you started out the right way, like if you started in a very small market and you just were trained and knew exactly how to run the board and how to talk on air and how FCC guidelines worked, were able to move up through the ranks, like what makes you any less qualified than the next person?
Oh, okay.
I could see though, just like it being one of those HR things where like I didn't, I've seen them so many times, I've bypassed them on a resume, or on an application, I don't think about them, where it says like 4-year college degree
Really?
required.
Oh, okay.
Bachelor's required.
So for some of them.
It could say that in large markets. I wouldn't be surprised, especially with big companies too, where that's just a qualification. At the same time, like there's Illinois Media School, you can get like a 2-year certificate in board opting for radio and radio broadcasting.
Oh, okay.
So I know a couple of people who that was their route as well,
Okay.
and so they're able to do that, and then they're able to get on air.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different avenues.
Okay.
Worst case, go look at an application and see what the requirements
That's
are.
true. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, especially if you're in a big city, I bet there's so many assets, so many different avenues you can take to be able to have the knowledge to be required.
Okay. Sounds
And
good.
no one path is the right path.
Sounds good.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty much all the questions I had. Did you want to add anything else? I mean, share anything from your previous experience or current experience?
Yeah, I don't know. Just could say like obviously, I know that I am. Yes, I have the skill set to be where I am, but also I'm extremely lucky and happy and humble to have the job that I have so far.
Yeah.
Even with the aspirations and how far I still want to go, I see how far I've already gotten and how many people have wanted to be just where I am already.
Right.
So I'm obviously extremely happy and grateful to be just even right here.
Right.
And I did it the right way. It's minimum wage promotions assistant for 10 months, and didn't just do that because I wanted to be on air. I did that because I loved the radio station I was in promotions for. So in everything you do, you have to be able to show that little bit of love you can have for that position.
Yeah.
And people will take notice, and maybe you can show them how you could love something else.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What's 2019 looking like for you? What are you doing to situate yourself for the next chapter?
Ooh, big things. Hopefully, a lot of different avenues.
Yeah, you're dabbling in a lot of things.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like dabbling in a lot of things, and like even if none of them take off, you still get to look back at all this cool stuff you've done.
Right.
And then if one of them
right.
does take off, like.
Man, what if 3 of them take off?
Right. Yeah. What if 3 of them take off? That would be right. If life could only be so great. But yeah, I think there was something. Joe from Stranger Things, like that kid, like he was flipping burgers in Chicago. He's a DePaul alumni.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah, and he just he got the audition for Netflix.
What?
And he got this role, and now he's a superstar.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was flipping burgers.
Which one's Joe?
I forgot. So the actor's name is Joe. It's the boyfriend with the hair.
Oh, I know.
the
Okay,
first season.
that's who I thought.
Yeah, and like
didn't
now
know
he's in
that.
the cover of like GQ
He's in a band
and stuff.
too, right?
Yeah, he's in a band that plays around Chicago all the time. Like that nobody went to see before Stranger Things came out. Now like they have lines down the block. They're pretty good.
Okay.
They sound like a lot of like young 20-year-old guy bands in Chicago.
Grungy
It's-
or ska or
Oh, it's
indie
got like
or-
that like Twin Peaks mixed with like alternative like type of vibe for sure. But yeah, so the same thing. Like he was an actor who was like down in the trenches, just like willing to eat little stuff for a year and put your eggs in a bunch of different baskets. Hopefully, one of them takes off.
Yeah, it's fun, and it just takes off.
If it does, yeah.
When it does, it does.
Right, and maybe it doesn't, but it just looks like us as the public, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, no, actually, like it took like 8 months to film this thing, and then it didn't premiere for another 10 months, and then it took off,
Oh.
or like we don't see all of this build up for all this work, and it could have been like 12-hour shoot days every single day to make, per episode.
Yeah.
Or 5 days per episode, 12 hours a day just to make one episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and then from the outside, yeah, it just takes off.
Yeah.
And you almost forget for a second occasionally, like, oh, I'm on radio, like so you'll be in an Uber and I'm like, oh, you're listening to my station. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm on air for this station. They're like, really? Why are you in an Uber pool? And I'm like, I still need Uber pools. Sorry. But like to hear them be so like, they're like, that's so cool. Tell me more. Like it brings you back down. You're like, wow, yeah, I really do have a cool job, and it's fun to hear other people say that.
Well, it's funny because I've met a couple of my guests through Lyft.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing too. In the show Easy, which is based around Chicago culture.
I know. I love that episode.
Yeah, with the comedian
where they all come together.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So everyone's hustling. I was just in LA, and I was like, I wonder what % of the Ubers and Lyfts I take here will be with kids who are either actors or singers or people trying to make
who wish
it in
that they were at the Grammys like you are.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's also a very awesome opportunity.
Right.
But it's interesting. Like all of these people are just like doing what they need to do so that they can also pursue their dream at the same time.
Yeah.
But then also I've met a lot of them who are like, you know what? Now I have like, I'm getting high up. Like I was a waiter and now I'm a general manager, or
Right.
something like that. So they're moving up in an industry and getting more pay.
But they're not really loving.
So they're forgetting.
what they're doing.
So they're not loving it as much, and they're forgetting about their passion at the same time.
Yeah.
But then eventually they'll have a renaissance. Like, but I'm getting back to my passion, and that's the hope, is that they can get back to their passion.
Yep. That's the goal.
Right. It's that old passion versus comfortability war that we all fight.
I know.
Causes our existential crises.
Every day.
Yes, every day. Or I was gonna say senior year of college when you're like, I need a job, but every day. Yeah, it definitely.
But I don't know what job.
Yeah, right. Yeah, do I pick the job that doesn't pay as much?
Right.
Will my parents be proud of me if I have a job that doesn't?
Well, that's another thing. You gotta please yourself before you please your parents.
Yeah, self-care is really important.
Yeah.
And self-care starts with, are you happy with what you're doing from 9 to 5?
Right. Culture plays a huge part into that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like my parents were the one that paid for college, so I feel like I owe them everything.
Right.
Like they wanted me a doctor, I'll be a doctor. Or like
Right.
I'll try to be a doctor.
Yeah, you're
like,
indebted to them, and you want because also part of self-care is like, I want to be happy, and for me being happy means making my parents happy.
Yeah.
But then also me being happy means I enjoy what I do. So those things fight against each other.
That brings us to law school.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
You had a full ride to law school.
Yeah, I had a full ride to John Marshall Law School in Chicago, which is a great law school, merging with UIC right now. A mayoral candidate went there. It's a big school. But I had to unfortunately make the choice because during syllabus week, they're just like, yeah, like it's going to be 60 to 70 hours a week that you need to dedicate to law school. Not only that, like we actually mandatory, you can't work over 20 hours a week if you're going to be a full-time student. And first off, at the time, I was working. Yes.
Oh, if you're a full-time student.
Yeah.
Which does your scholarship not apply for part-time or?
I'm not. I can't remember if it did or not.
Yeah.
But part-time, it was still like it was just one less class. That was the only
So
option.
it's not worth it.
Yeah, the only option for part-time was taking just one less class. So you're still taking like 4 classes a week instead of 5. And if it was part-time, like okay, you can take 2 classes a week, and just it'll take you so and so amount of time longer. You have to do summer courses too. I would have done it, but 4 classes a week. And at the time when I was doing 3 to 5 overnight shifts a week, wasn't possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I work with a fireman right now. He's doing it part-time, I think through Loyola. But
yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of downtime at the firehouse, so he's making it work.
So yeah, that can absolutely work if you can sit there and do all the work.
Yeah, no, he hides in a hole and like is face deep in a book.
Right, so you have to. You really have to have those 60 hours a week to be able to dedicate. Yeah. And I just didn't. Not only that, but like. I had an 8 a.m. class, so I'd work from midnight to 6 a.m., sleep in my car for an hour, and then commute to John Marshall in the city.
So how long did you try it?
I did syllabus week, which had a day of classes, and then I did the first 2 days of the semester, and then made sure to withdraw or like freeze my account so I could technically go back before the deadline in which you would have to pay like 20%. Yeah, the whole thing instead of just like whatever it was covered by the scholarship.
Now, how hard of a decision was that?
It was super hard because there are a lot of people I look up to family side who think that a law degree is very impressive and wanted me to go to law school. But at the same time, I had to like have that fight of like, okay, like the happiness that comes from like gratifying these people or the happiness that can come from enjoying what I do.
Right.
And at the end of the day, we were talking earlier about like pay your dues where you want them to pay off. What would I be happier with, the dues paying off of like being a lawyer that makes a lot of money, or if the dues could potentially pay off and I'm a radio personality, like a morning show, who's also doing this like little like TV content or something like that as well. And I chose obviously the radio personality
Right,
side.
right.
And if the situation changes, like if I can do law school online or only take 1 or 2 classes a week, I will for sure still do it. But at the moment, it's not.
Maybe, because I mean,
Time-wise.
after the MBA program started at UIC, they opened up a weekend MBA program, which is what I'm in.
Oh, really?
So just
Yeah,
Saturdays,
so things
Saturday,
are
Sunday.
emerging, and I figure honestly in the
Right.
next 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
there will be an online law degree program that's
Right, right.
recognized by the Bar Association.
Right, right.
And one that's more adaptable to people's lifestyles.
Did you? Yeah.
Either that or artificial intelligence will just wipe out the need for lawyers.
Right.
You never know.
Which I haven't finished that episode of Andrew Yang on Joe Rogan, but he
I
went
haven't
to
seen it
AI,
yet.
and that's why a lot of our trades and jobs and retail and truckers, they're creating AI trucks with a 99% no crash rate. So you still need 100%, but it's
Right.
and that's why people are scared.
Right.
Right.
And that gets back to like, all right, you never know what life's gonna bring.
Yeah.
So maybe for me, it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna go after what I love because maybe in 5 years, radio will, like, you know, all be online, or maybe the other job that I was going for that wasn't radio, that wasn't my passion, will be obsolete because of AI. So I might as well go after the one I love.
Even if it's obsolete.
if the risk is that either of these jobs could go obsolete, might as well do the one that's gratifying to you.
Oh yeah. No, you're right. If that's the case.
Right. If
but
Trump does something
these people
wrong,
are
we get
freaking
in
out.
and-
These people are like, what? Do
Yeah.
I have to learn coding now?
Right. And a lot of people are learning coding.
Yeah.
I had a friend who studied CS who was my age, 24 years old, and like I asked his dad once, I was like, did you know when you were like getting him to take computer classes in high school, it was gonna turn into this like dope 6-figure job right out of college? And he's like, no idea. Absolutely not. But it's just supply and demand, and obviously yeah.
Market's always changing.
Yeah, the market's always changing.
Well, damn, that's all I had, pretty much. So I really appreciate you spending the time. I know you're a busy man and
Consciously curious.
Sleep consciously curious. Yeah.
Great brand. I wore it all throughout LA for the Grammys.
Oh yeah, I definitely appreciate that. I saw
Absolutely.
that. But you know, maybe we can touch base after some time, and maybe other doors are opening for you, whether that's moving up in the extras world or becoming an actual actor or
Yeah.
voiceover work, or maybe just a better prime spot on a radio station, or maybe a different radio station, wherever that leads. Like, we definitely wish you the best of luck, and I'm sure you have the right mindset, the right mentality. You have your head down and you're eating shit for now, and that's okay. Like, you have parents that love you. Like, you didn't face a lot of heat for
Sometimes.
dropping out of law school or something, or maybe if you did, like, it's like definitely simmered down. And
Yes, absolutely simmer down.
right, but you do have the right mentality that your happiness comes first.
Yeah.
And even though we have that, we owe it to them for where we are at the same time. So it's that fine balance of self-care versus
Right.
gratitude for who got us to where we are as well. But definitely thank you again for spending the time, and for all you people, just stay curious.
Stay curious.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.